record-breakingly high numbers of teen suicide every year. We have double the amount of suicide. We have 2 times as many deaths from suicide as we have from the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and 1 in 65,000 children ages 10 to 14 will commit suicide, which, being that they're that young, is very unfortunate. So as you're wondering here, what does 1 in 5 mean? 1 in 5 refers to the 1 in 5 children that will suffer an episode of depression before they reach the age of 20. That's according to the National Institute of Mental Health. But that's not bipolar, that's not anxiety, that's not depression and anxiety, or multiple of them together. And it would really be more like 2.5 or 3 or even 3.5 in 5. So I'm going to ask you, what do you see? A guy that's, a little funny, a little goofball, likes to laugh. Someone that, loves his family very much, likes having a good time. Would you happen to see depression or anxiety in that picture? No, I don't think so. And unfortunately, as is the case with the thousands of children and adults that suffer with this every year, most people don't know. And some of them even don't know, as misdiagnoses and not being diagnosed is a very rampant issue we have. And there's that picture there. So with this picture, you see the bird. So what is depression? The CDC defines depression as the general feeling of downness attributed with lack of interest in daily activities that impairs daily life. It's a little bit vague, and people have their own definition of what it is to them. But for me, this picture sums it up perfectly. Those days in the summer when you'd want to go outside and play with your friends, and all you could think about was how much of a good time you'd have, and then you see that it's torrentially downpouring, or that it's cloudy and it will soon torrentially downpour. And that is the same with depression. It is this cloud in one's head that rolls and it waits, and you don't want it to come, just like you don't want that rain to come. But unfortunately, at some point it's going to come, and it's something that makes it happen. Now, with the rain, stuff goes up in the atmosphere, and then it rains. But with depression, it's one gets triggered, or just simply, they just happen. We don't really have much control over them. And so, yeah, we're gonna start my story now. So this is a picture, I apologize for the profanity in it, of a page from my journal when I was having one of my rougher days. And I could attribute having my depression, obviously, to genetics, as having a mom that was bipolar, and several other family members that suffered from anxiety and depression, etc. But depression is also caused from experiences that one has early in adolescence. And for me, growing up in a kind of gruff area in Northeast Philadelphia, as you could tell with my accent, it was a little bit rough, and I got talked down to a lot. And people would tell me how I was fat, or how I was a nerd, or how I didn't have any friends, or I couldn't run fast enough. And these little things that people would say started to develop in thoughts that I'd have in my own head. I'd hear that kid, Eric, in my head telling me, yeah, you're fat, you're not good enough, you're a nerd. And it slowly over time developed. But coming from a family of 4 sisters, and I'm the oldest, I was always supposed to be the strongest one. And given some different situations in my house, I had to step up and be the strong one. And I knew with that mindset that I needed, that whatever my problem was, it had to be put away. And so I would get these thoughts, I'd just push them away. It's not happening, I'm not hearing this, I'm not hearing this. I was like, this is normal, right? Every kid has this, right? And so it started to get worse and worse and more corrosive on myself. And eventually it started to go into these things would make me feel down. And not down like, oh, I'm sad, but I'm better. It's I'm sad, and it gets lower than that. And it's I'm sad, I don't want to be here, I want to run away, I don't want to do this anymore. And so as I got older and older, more and more of these thoughts started to happen. And then with hearing these constant voices in my head from other people, I started to develop them in myself, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't working hard enough, that I would get nowhere in life. Everything I was doing was wrong. A simple conversation I might have with you. You might think, this is a great conversation Jason's having. He's talking, we're having a great talk about sports, something like that. But that's not what I'm thinking in my head. I'm thinking, wow, you sound like an idiot there. They're totally not going to talk to you after this. They don't want to keep in touch. You just look like an idiot. You sound like an idiot. Do you hear yourself talk? And it's this every day. And it's tiring. It's very tiring having to constantly, in the back of your mind, hear this. And again, as I get older and older, it gets more and more negative and more self-damaging. And eventually, it got to the point where instead of just thoughts of how much I hate myself and how much I just wasn't happy with what was going on, it became that my way of getting out of this was something called a suicidal ideation, which is the thought of taking one's own life. And in dealing with those, again, I just kept pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. And you can ask anybody that went to middle school with me. I was one of the loudest, funniest, craziest kids you probably had ever met. If you were to think of me as being someone with severe anxiety or depression, you'd have been like, what? Like, that's a joke, right? And unfortunately, that wasn't a joke. And in my freshman year of high school, I said, I'm going to show everyone the real Jason. All these feelings and all these thoughts I had, they're gone. It's a clean slate. I'm a new man, and you know, this is the real me. And so with doing that, I allowed these thoughts to come out. And I allowed myself to acknowledge them. Instead of just pretending they weren't there, they were there, and they were very real. And dealing with them, it was very hard. And having to go through a typical day as a student, you get anxious. You have a test, you get worried about it. Things happen, and you get upset. But when it's just simply going through your day and having to deal with these constantly, almost once every 10 minutes, at one point I was starting to count, and it was about once every 10 minutes I'd have a thought that was either extremely worrisome or extremely down like that. It's so much when you're trying to work and you're trying to do your sport and you're trying to do all your other things when you're constantly just dealing with this. And so, let me go to this next slide here. So there's stigmas that come with people that suffer from depression. Some people say that it shows that, especially as a man, that you're weak and that you're feminine because you acknowledge your feelings and that you're not allowed to cry, it's absolutely false. And there's this stigma of people that are called emo, which is short for emotional people, and that, you know, you have to dye your hair different colors and wear shirts with, you know, metal bands and stuff like that, and have piercings and, you know, different stuff like that. That was what someone that had depression looked like. Someone like me doesn't look like someone that has depression, or even someone in this crowd, oh, they don't look like they have depression because they don't show any of these characteristics. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. And that's what I really want, one of my big points that people take home from this, is that it comes in many different shapes and many different sizes, and it doesn't care what you have. I was going through probably one of the worst points in my life. And I'm a very religious person, and I remember one night praying, and I was saying to God, you know, like, if you cut my hand off, I feel pain, and I can't use this hand anymore, but it's gone. And that's what some people, that's what the problem of their life is. For me, my problem wasn't that my hand was cut off. I hated myself. I was anxious at myself all the time, and I wasn't sure of myself, and I hated being in my own skin. And I asked, why? Why do I have to have this? Why do I have to carry this burden in my life? Why can't I just have my hand cut off? Or why can't I just get bad grades or something like that? I would so love to have C's and not have to deal with this, but instead I didn't. And it was trying to figure that out. And sometimes I would hear people say that it was something was wrong with you. And yes, it is a chemical imbalance in the brain and also having these things happen to you. But that wasn't totally the case with me. It was something that I couldn't help and I couldn't control. And it's horrible to have to deal with that and constantly just asking why. I remember I used to pray. I was like, if I could get one day where I don't have to deal with this, I'll do anything. Please, just one day I could be happy and not have to worry and constantly think and grind myself out like this. And eventually, sorry here. Okay. So eventually what ended up happening is in the second semester of my freshman year, these thoughts became, we'll take it back a little bit. So I'm dealing with this for a very long time by myself. Nobody knew, and nobody probably could have thought. And eventually, again, so I keep saying the word eventually, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and these thoughts getting more and more negative and more self-damaging. And it's getting to the point where now it's not, I'm pushing it away, I'm not thinking about it, or why do I have to deal with this? It's, I don't want to deal with this. I'm done dealing with this. There's only one solution to this, and it's I have to leave. and it's not leaving like running away, but it's leaving permanently. And so with coming with that answer for myself, it was horrible. I remember during Christmas, it was a really hard time for me because everybody's happy and jovial and celebrating these holidays, and I just remember feeling guilty. I said, why are you upset right now? Look at all these presents you have. Is that not good enough for you? There's obviously something's wrong with you. And again, it's this negative self-talk. And I felt horrible. I felt absolutely horrible. I said, you don't deserve anything that you have. You don't deserve to get to go from Northeast Philadelphia to Plymouth meeting. This is just a freak accident. And you're just going to end up like some bum on the street, like one of those people that you used to make fun of when you were a little kid. And that was really hard to hear from myself. Instead of trying to help myself feel better, making myself feel worse, and having that being my coping mechanism to how I deal with these feelings. And so, again, it got to the point where I had to reach out to my parents, and that was one of the hardest things that I've had to do. Doing this TED in itself, I can't tell you how many times the people on this board, I've said, I'm done, I'm not doing it, I can't do this talk, this is too hard for me. But I realized that it's important enough where I have to do it. And so I realized that, okay, and again, back to this is around winter of my freshman year, I finally told my parents, which was really hard, and telling them that I kept it very vague. I was like, look, I'm not feeling right. We gotta do something because I can't keep doing this. And so we realized that therapy was probably gonna be my best solution. So he got me a therapist, and therapy is great. I love therapy. My therapist I have now currently is amazing. But sometimes there's a little bit of trial and error that comes with it. And with me, my first go about it wasn't really that great. I felt very uncomfortable with her. She was a little bit of an older woman, and we didn't really get along that great when we would talk, and I felt very uncomfortable. But the Jason that was in middle school became very prevalent again. I told everyone I was cured. I was all better. My depression was gone. My anxiety was gone. I'm taking this new amazing medication called Lexapro, which I absolutely hated. It gave me night terrors every night, and it amped up my anxiety in addition to making me feel much more tired. But that was what was happening. I'm better. I'm cured. The depression's gone. And so I'm back to square one. I'm lying every day about how I'm feeling. I'm telling everyone that I'm feeling better and that I'm energized and that all these feelings are gone. But they're getting even worse because I'm neglecting that they're even there. I'm neglecting trying to even push them away, and they're just happening. But I'm telling everyone that they're not. And I was lying to my therapist. And it got to the point where, again, I got in that low spot. And it became so hard to deal with that sometime after spring break, I decided that this is it. This was the time that it was going to happen. And I mean, I won't try to be too descriptive, but I made my final thing that I wanted to leave people. And this thought of my own funeral started to happen. And I started to see my teachers and my friends and family and people that had known me. And they're looking at me and they're saying, why? Why, Jason? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you do this? If only we could have known. And I'm seeing all these things. It's every day. And mind you, while this is all happening, I had the highest honor roll. I was my class vice president running for president, and I was on varsity track. People would have had no idea this internal war that is going on inside myself. But I couldn't take it anymore, and I was sick and tired of trying to have people help me and trying to do therapy and medicine and all of this. I couldn't deal with it anymore. And so the night that I was going to do it, I gave myself one final look in the mirror. I'll backpedal a little bit. So I went through my normal day, and it's a very scary thing, thinking of everything as your last time doing it. I left every classroom, and I got a little tear in my eye because I thought, that's the last time I'm going to see that teacher, and that's the last time I'm going to see this friend. And in track, lining up on the blocks, this is the last time I'm going to run the 100. And after that, my mom actually took me to lunch. And sitting there having dinner with your family, and you're looking at your sisters, and then that's the last time that you're going to see Emily and the last time you're going to see Juliet. And, take it in, Jay, and enjoy it, because this is what depression had to do to you. You couldn't choose having this happen to you, and you still have to deal with it and, sulk it in. And again, and I came home, and so my parents were divorced, and I saw my little baby sisters, and again, I'm looking at them and then enjoy Sammy and Livy, and I hope that they remember the little bit that they had of you, and and I look in the mirror, and this is after that, and I'm like, okay, it's time, and I see every person that ever told me that they believed in me, every time someone ever said, Jason, you're going to do great things, and I'm quitting on them. I'm leaving all that behind. All that doesn't get to happen because my mind's telling me that it can't. And that's not fair. I wanted to be a public servant, and I still want to be a public servant. I want to do all these great things in the world, but I can't do that because I'm not going to be alive to do that. And I stopped, and I said, this isn't where it ends. This is not where it ends. This is not where my story stops. There's so much more, but I need to get the proper help, and I need to get it right away. So we called the Montgomery County Mobile Crisis, who is an amazing group of people, and they ended up determining that partial hospitalization, which is a program that is, there's full hospitalization, which is when one goes to a mental health, not asylum, but it's basically your liability to the state, where you are not safe enough to live with yourself, and you have to be under 24/7 supervision, and you don't get to see your family for a couple days, and it's a very alone and secluded thing. And my mother, having been through it, she said, Jason, when you respond to these people, don't tell them everything because they'll put you there. And some of these places are really great for people, but she said for me that probably wasn't the best option. So they ended up putting me in this partial program, and it is probably one of the greatest things that I've ever been blessed enough to experience. And it's not through the greatness of the program, but it's through the things that it taught me. These two pictures are ones that I did on the right here. It's one I did on my first day and one that I did on my second to last day. And as you can see, the tone kind of changes. My first day there, I remember sitting in group, and I hated it. I was like, this is the last thing that Jason wanted. I'm missing my presidential election, which I ended up missing all of. I'm missing track meets. My grades are slipping because I'm missing all this class time, and this is the last thing I wanted. I'm thinking how much I hate it and how much I want to get out. But then we had our first day in group, and I'm hearing these kids tell their stories, and I heard of a girl who was adopted, and her family, her parents told her how much they hated adopting her and how they never wanted her, and her sister had attempted to take her own life. I heard another kid that struggled with severe substance abuse, and hearing that from a 13-year-old that was younger than me, having to deal with these problems, but yet hearing that I don't deal with these things that these kids have. This disease takes so many different shapes and there's so many different courses, and that's what really makes it such a unique and such a hard thing to deal with, is that it's people of all different races, all different religions, all different sexes, ages, etc. that deal with it. And so in hearing that, I said, Jason, you have these things. And I finally started to acknowledge the good that I had. Instead of constantly always looking on the bad, I didn't say, you have a family, you have those four sisters, you have these parents, and you have these friends and all these people that support you, unlike these kids. And that was one of the main things I took from it. And I took some friendships. Unfortunately, two kids I know died of suicide. And that in itself is really, I heard, I think 2.5 weeks after I got out of the Life program. And again, we weren't supposed to give each other phone numbers, but we became really close in this. And through that, I was able to hear this. And then I heard about 2 months ago that another friend of mine had passed. And I mean, it was rough, but again, I took it and I said, you know what, Jason, this is it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I came back to school, and I was ready, I was recharged, and yeah, let me say, that's my next. So I was ready, I was recharged, and again, this is the night before, and sorry for the profanity. Again, it's this message of my unsureness and what was happening, and my fear of what was happening. And so I went, and I said, we're going to get to that point again, Jay. You have to just trust. And I started to finally push these feelings. But unfortunately, I came back, and it wasn't this amazing story of how people were understanding, and I became this champion of mental health. Instead, it was, again, people saying, how was your vacation? I went on a vacation the day after break on a Monday, really, without telling anybody. That's what happened? No. Or people saying, I heard you have something wrong with you. Like, are you okay? And hearing all these things. And even some of the people I would hear, chitter-chatter, oh my God, I already tried to kill himself. And, just coming back to that, I was like, wow, like, I love this school so much, but kids' ignorance and their lack of understanding and knowledge in this is really fatal. And it made me feel horrible about myself. I'm like, great. I'm Jason. I'm supposed to be good. I'm supposed to be doing this. But, like, something's wrong with me. I'm, not mentally like an okay person because I have to deal with this. And again, I'm like, why me? Why do I have to deal with this? And then so when I heard that TED was doing this, I originally I was adamant. I was like, this is going to be my thing that I do to get people to understand about what I deal with and what all these other kids deal with. And so I did a series of interviews with up to 15 students. Sorry, I lost count for a second there. 15 students, and I was going to post each one of what they put, but they asked to remain anonymous. And so I'm able to give general summary. And the main thing that a lot of us were able to agree on was that in having mental health and being in school, time for schoolwork is very hard to deal with. Trying to make this TED Talk was like trying to bench like 500 million pounds. Trying to do schoolwork sometimes when all this is going on, again, it's so mentally and physically draining. Getting up in the morning, I remember there was days when I was like, why do I have to get up? Like, I can't, and slugging through the day like that. And these kids that I talked to, they all were coming to that same consensus on how even waking up sometimes is an achievement that we would take for granted sometimes. And we said that we wished people had known more. And even I said in my story, and other people could attest to it, we want people to know, but we're scared of people knowing, and we're uncomfortable with people knowing. Because once people unfortunately knew about mine, because I had confided in a friend and they ended up telling anyway, when it gets out, it's not exactly the best response. Some people, it's absolutely amazing. Some of the things they said to me every day when I'm having those thoughts, I go back on because I'm like, that person was there for me, that person understands, they get it. But some don't. Some people just don't understand, and that's fine. There's not really too much education that goes on about this topic, and that's why with this talk, a lot of these kids said they want people to understand that it's people with depression, they're not down all the time. Again, with me, I'm doing all these things and functioning completely normally. It's an inside thing that I don't want people to know, and we don't want people to know, but it's having to deal with this. And everything else is, we said that another problem was being a teen and having to constantly deal with everything of being a teen. Sports and school and friends and events. And then on top of it, this is going on the entire time you're doing all of those things. And it's this juggling act that becomes so tiring. And I found myself sometimes saying, I'm a burnout in my sophomore year. And it's not totally from my workload, but a lot of it's from my own workload that I unfortunately have to deal with. And a lot of kids wish that if there was a way for people to know, but without them having to know. Like people said, not if it was like a card that said it, but if there was like a holograph thing that they couldn't see, but someone else could see, that could say like, hey, I need you to be a little bit more sensitive with me. People make jokes a lot of times about having depression. They'll not get something done. They'll say, oh, I'm such depression right now, or oh man, I'm really feeling depression, or some people, they'll say, oh man, I'm just gonna kill myself with this. And with us that actually physically deal with those thoughts, it's a slap in the face having to hear that from people. Oh yeah, so my anguish that I deal with, that I wish I never had, that's a joke to you. That's where you get your comedic relief and being able to sum up how you're feeling. That wasn't fair to us, and we really don't want to have to keep constantly dealing with these stigmas that go with this illness. And so finally here, I guess solutions would be is that, again, I hope that all of you take something home from this. And I want to encourage conversations. I want people to come to me and I want them to ask me those questions. I want everyone, if I could get everyone to ask me a question that goes to this school, I would be the happiest person alive. If we could maybe do pamphlets or some sort of education that could get out to people, that would be really good, just to give a little bit more awareness, because honestly, I don't think people have any malintent saying, oh man, I could just kill myself. I think we're a bunch of high school kids that are insensitive and they don't totally know what they're saying. And so if we could get a little bit of a better idea that, hey, you need to be a little bit more cognizant of that, that would go a really long way. And that, not necessarily directly to teachers, but just to society in general, it's hard to deal with. And I don't like to say that I have a bad work ethic, because sometimes I have a really good work ethic, but sometimes I don't have that. And let's say that I'm doing a job and then I'm expected to meet a quota, and then my boss is like, why didn't you do all this? And I'm trying to explain to them, like, I really want to, but you see, it's kind of, and it's, you get into that, and you're having to explain that, it's really uncomfortable. And so I hope that together, all across the board, we can help crush this illness through being able to talk. Because honestly, one of the main themes that I see in my own talk is that I didn't talk enough. I wasn't vocal enough about how I was feeling. And a lot of these people that I talked to, they said the same thing. They wished that they had talked about it more, and they wished that they hadn't pushed it to a side. And so finally, my final note I leave you with is that this is a very beatable thing, but it takes all hands on deck, and it takes a society that understands and is knowledged and is educated about this subject. Thank you very much.